Hello and welcome to Kentucky Derby 149. It's going to be a great race, and unfortunately we won't have a full field of 20, a bunch of scratches, but we've got also eligible horses that will fill in. So we're still going to have a huge field for the Kentucky Derby, and we're going to go over the also eligibles for sure after what Rich Strike did at the longest price on the board last year. Let's start right into it. We're going to go through all the horses 1 through 23. Then we'll look at some pace projections and give you some top picks. Starting with the number 1, Hit Show, a horse that raced in New York over the spring. And he was a horse that did pretty well, but the New York horses, not that impressed with. So Hit Show, going to be coming from off the pace. It's hard to see him getting a piece of this race, especially with the one post. He's going to be trapped inside. Number 2 is Verifying. And Verifying is an impressive colt, especially after what he did in the Bluegrass Stakes in a losing effort. Didn't get the job done against Tapit Trice, but ran with him from all the way down the stretch as good as you could expect any horse to. And Verifying is one of the few horses that is going to be forwardly placed that I think has a real chance to run well today. So Verifying, a horse you definitely want to use, especially if you want a horse that's going to be on or near the lead, because he's going to have to go early from the 2 post. 2 Fills is the number 3 horse, and 2 Fills is definitely an impressive horse. His last race was the same prep race that Rich Strike used to win the Derby, the Jeff Ruby Stakes at Turfway Park. Now that is on an all-weather type surface, synthetic, not on dirt. But the key here is, just like Rich Strike, who had won at Churchill Downs prior to his race, 2 Fills has run well and actually won at Churchill and has run well on dirt before. So it's not just the type that he isn't a dirt horse but got in because of his win at Turfway. I think he's definitely a contender in this race. 2 Fills is one to keep an eye on. He was very impressive in the Jeff Ruby Stakes in this win. He had one of the highest speed figures of any prep race from any horse. The number 4 horse is Confidence Game. And Confidence Game won this Rebel Stakes on the slop. It was a very fast pace. He came from off of it, got the win. I expect Confidence Game to be forwardly placed. He's going to want to be near the lead. But this is a horse with a lot of question marks. He is on the longest layoff out of any horses. Didn't run in any of the 100-point races, the only horse that didn't, because he won this Rebel Stakes worth 50 points, and that was enough to get him into the Derby. So he hasn't raced in over 2 months. He's been training really well leading up to the Kentucky Derby. Honestly, at this point, he is my biggest wild card. I'm still on the fence on whether to use this horse or not. He's just a tough one to decide because of all these factors. Training really well, was impressive in the Rebel, but it was a fast pace on the slop. He hasn't ran as well on a dry track, but he's training really well on a dry track. It's a tough call for Confidence Game, the 4 horse. Tapit Trice is the 5 horse, and we saw that win in the Bluegrass, taking down Verifying. Here he is in the Tampa Bay Derby, got off to a really bad start, made up a lot of ground, and still won impressively. This is a horse that is very impressive. Has won 4 of 5 lifetime starts, only his first career start did he finish 3rd. Since then, 4 straight wins, and that's why he might be the favorite come post time, and we'll talk about why in just a minute. But Tapit Trice is definitely a horse that I think, as long as he stays out of trouble, and now with the diminishing field, only 18 horses that he'll have to be a part of and navigate, I think it might be easier for him to get out wide on the backstretch, be able to make a run turning for home. I think he's got a great chance to finish in the top 3. Probably the horse that I will use that I will say will definitely be in the top 3. Number 6 is Kingsbarns, another horse that has a lot of question marks about it. Kingsbarns, he's 3 for 3 undefeated lifetime, but his only really impressive win in terms of who he beat was in the Louisiana Derby. The other one was a maiden at Gulfstream and an allowance at Tampa, so not the greatest fields. But in the Louisiana Derby, it was the slowest pace of any race. He was on the front, walked them around the track, and then when it came to come home, he kicked home really well. But he didn't have to do any hard running before that. So it's a tough question on whether Kingsbarn just got the perfect trip or is he actually a contender with only 3 career races. It's hard for me to trust him because he's not going to get that dream trip like he did in the Louisiana Derby, although he is a higher price than some might expect just based off his results 3 for 3 lifetime. Reincarnate is the 7, and Reincarnate, a former Bob Baffert horse, moved over to the Tim Yakteen barn because Baffert not allowed to be in the Derby again this year. But that's really the only thing that is impressive about him, is that he is a Bob Baffert horse, at least in my opinion, because in his races in these Derby preps, he just hasn't been that good, racing both the ones in Arkansas, the Rebel and the Arkansas Derby. Finished an even third in both of them, and at least a couple lengths off the leaders, whether it was Confidence Game and the Rebel that we already saw, or Angel of Empire and the Arkansas Derby. So Reincarnate is a horse that could be close to the pace, but I don't expect him to stay there once the cavalry starts running at him down the stretch. Reincarnate, not for me. The number 8 is Mage, and Mage is a very, very interesting horse. Just like Kingsbarn, has just 3 career starts, and the difference though, he's only won 1 of those career starts because the other 2 he was running against Forte and the Fountain of Youth in the Florida Derby. In the Fountain of Youth, he was just a 2nd career start, and he got bumped down the lane. We'll be looking at that race here in a little bit. In the Florida Derby, bad break. So basically, he's a horse that is impressive, but always finds a way to get into trouble, can never run a clean race. And against a big field in the Derby and just your 4th career race, that's a lot to ask to clean it up on this type of stage. Mage, got talent, but I just don't think that today is the day that I'm going to trust him. The number 9, Skinner from California, scratched. The number 10, Practical Move, also from California, another Tim Yakteen horse. This one scratched as well. Unfortunate for both of them. Skinner I was going to like. Practical Move I was going to play against. The 11, Disarm, is Steve Asmussen horse. Of course, Asmussen last year with Epicenter ran 2nd, got nabbed at the wire. And this is Asmussen's only horse here in the Derby this year. Definitely one that I'm going to be using at 30-1. His 2 races on the Derby circuit, the Louisiana Derby and then the Lexington, were 2 of the slowest run races out of any on the prep circuit. And he's a horse that's going to be in the middle or towards the back early on. In the Louisiana Derby, he was 6th all the way down the backstretch, made up enough ground to come 2nd in that race where everyone should have been full of energy turning for home. And the Lexington was the same type. He was in the middle of the pack. The top 2 pace setters ran 1st and 2nd in that race. He got 3rd, so hasn't won a race this year. And I don't expect him to win the Kentucky Derby, but I think he could be one that can get 2nd, 3rd, or 4th, blow up that tote board, disarm all. Basically, the pace has been against him. And so if it changes today, he's one that would move forward. The number 12 is Jace's Road, and he's one that might be a reason why the pace changes. He's by the same connections as the number 14 that we'll get to, Angel of Empire, one of the big favorites. Same owner and same trainer, and Brad Cox. And Jace's Road was one of the horses that let Kingsbarns have an easy run at it in the Louisiana Derby. I don't think he's going to do that again just because of Angel of Empire in there wanting a hot pace to chase. So Jace's Road, I'm not going to say going to be a rabbit per se, but is going to be a horse that they think our only chance is really to steal it on the front end, and it's going to help our horse. We're not going to completely send him, but we're going to be as aggressive as possible in the race. So I think Jace's Road will be out near the front. He was 2nd in that Louisiana Derby the whole way around until he got caught by Disarm. And just frankly doesn't seem like a horse that is good enough or wants the distance enough to be a contender in this race, but will be a horse that I expect to be in the top flight, maybe even first in the first couple furlongs. The number 13, Sun Thunder, the exact opposite, going to be a horse that might be dead last after the first few furlongs. Kenny McPeak, and he has been in so many of these Derby prep races, as I've run in 4 of them this year, which I think in just the calendar year of 23 has to be the most out of any horse that was ran in any prep races. Ran in 4 races, and his results were mixed in them: a 4th, 2nd, 5th, and then 4th. So he might get up for a piece of it. And this race that you're seeing is the Risen Star, which is the best result. He came in 2nd place, but that's because the pace melted down. That was a fast pace in the Risen Star, and the horses from the back did well. He ended up beating Two Phils, who tried to make an early move against that hot pace. So the race set up for Sun Thunder, still couldn't beat Angel of Empire. And the other races where it didn't set up for him as well, the Southwest Louisiana Derby and Bluegrass, he couldn't finish in the top 3. I think there's better closers to use than Sun Thunder. The 14, Angel of Empire, you just saw his Risen Star win. Now let's look at his Arkansas Derby win. Equally, if not more impressive. The Arkansas Derby still had questions after that Risen Star because of the fast pace and because of his modest beginnings, breaking his maiden at the race course in Indianapolis. So is a horse that wasn't really thought to be on the Kentucky Derby trail early. Now might be one of the favorites. Brad Cox got great connections. But, I mean, it's just crazy to think, you know, a horse like that to now be one of the favorites in the Kentucky Derby, although that was about the case for Maximum Security a few years back, so definitely doesn't disqualify him. In this Arkansas Derby, he was clearly the best horse. Now, the horses he ended up beating, a lot of them in this race today, but a lot of the longer shots on the board, King Russell, Reincarnate, Rocket Can, are those really impressive horses that he beat? I'm not sure. But it was a well-run race in the Arkansas Derby, and with those last 2 wins in the Risen Star and Arkansas Derby, deserves to be one of the favorites today. The 15 is Forte, who is a late scratch, and Forte was one of the horses I was going to be playing against, so kind of disappointing for me because the other horses I like will be taking more money now, not as many ways to go. But Forte was going to be Todd Pletcher. Irad Ortiz has won his last 4 races, including the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Last year was a 2-year-old champion, and he had done everything right in this Florida Derby. He was fantastic, knocking off Mage and Cyclone Mischief late, even though Mage got the jump on him. But those kind of things made me hesitant. The fact that he was a little late to run there and added distance, I wasn't going to think he was going to appreciate it. So Forte was going to be off my tickets. Now he's going to be off everyone's tickets. He is scratched. The number 16 is Raise Cane. Raise Cane might be the toughest one to get behind in the whole field. Right along there with Jace's Road. Raise Cane won a 1-turn mile in the Gotham, or just a mile race in the Gotham at Aqueduct on a sloppy track. Weak horses in New York, only a mile-long race. Then came back in the Bluegrass, was a non-threatening 5th behind Tappet, Trice, and Verifying. Just a step below the best horses in the field. The number 17 is a horse that I really, really like, Derma Sotogake. And similar to Kingsbarn, had a perfect setup in his last race, the UAE Derby. It was a slow pace, but he just kicked away so effortlessly. As soon as the jockey wanted him to start running, he did. He even was running well before that, and it was a much faster time at the same distance than Louisiana Derby, although that's so hard to translate when you talk about from halfway across the world. It's just the fact that this year's crop doesn't have a standout in my eyes, especially without Forte now, even in the public's eyes. And the Japanese horses have done so well across the world in recent years. Derma Sotogake is going to be, could be anywhere in the field, because in his races in Japan, he would run for mid-pack. Even in his earlier race in Saudi Arabia this year, he was running mid-pack and finished 3rd. Then he wins the UAE Derby on the lead, so people think he'll go to the lead. I could see him being anywhere in the top half of the race. I expect him to be somewhere in the top half, but doesn't have to be on the lead for me to think he's got a chance to win when they turn for home. Number 18, Rocket Can, a horse that we thought was going to be a big player, especially after his Fountain of Youth, where he did finish second to Forte, ahead of Cyclone Mischief and Mage. Ran on well, and between that and winning the Holy Bull in February at Gulfstream Park, looked like, okay, well, he's a pretty good horse, just ran into Forte in the Fountain of Youth. Then he comes back in the Arkansas Derby, and it isn't impressive, getting beat by 3 other horses, Angel of Empire, King Russell, and Reincarnate. So Rocket Can, I think it was a case of the Florida horses just not as impressive this year, which is another reason why I wasn't going to like Forte. Rocket Can, decent enough horse, don't have much great to say about him. I also don't think he'll want the distance, so I won't be using the 18 Rocket Can. Number 19, Lord Miles, is scratched. He won the Wood Memorial over Hit Show by just a nose, but he's not in this race now, so not much to talk about there. Continuar, another horse that was in the UAE Derby with Dermasotogaki, finished third in that race, also scratched. The number 21 horse is Cyclone Mischief, and this is a horse that got in, also eligible. I think he's going to be close to the front. He was on the lead in the Fountain of Youth, was near the pace enough in both the Holy Bull and Florida Derby to think that from the far outside they're going to want to try to go and speeding up the pace. He's a horse that drawing in, I think, makes the pace a little bit livelier, but not a horse that can contend, similar to Reincarnate, maybe even a step below, because when the real running started, he got passed up in both the Florida Derby and the Fountain of Youth, finished third in both of those races. The number 22, Mandarin Hero, another Japanese horse that people really like. He came over for the Santa Anita Derby, did just enough to get in the Derby with these scratches, now finishing second by a nose to Practical Move. And he had a dream trip in this race, though. Was sitting right behind the leaders, cut the corner on the turn, and then found a way to squeeze through opening and almost get up for the win. So a lot of people are encouraged by that effort. For me, with all 3 of those horses hitting the wire almost at the same time, and I wasn't really that high on Practical Move to begin with, I think that this might also be too much distance for Mandarin Hero, his sire Shanghai Bobby, a sprinter, and it's easier to run a mile and an eighth at Santa Anita than a mile and a quarter at Churchill Downs. That's really going to stretch out for Mandarin Hero. So while a lot of people like him as a sneaky pick, I do not, just because I think the other Japanese horse is much superior, and I think that this one won't appreciate the added distance. And finally, the 23 is King Russell. And if there is a rich strike to the group, it's King Russell, because he is just a horse that on paper doesn't stand out to you much. He's just got 1 win and 6 career lifetime starts. But he does come from flying from the back, and he's done that in his last few races. He's finished second 3 times out of his 6 career lifetime starts, including the Arkansas Derby, which did enough to make him the 23rd horse and now drawing into the field. So if you want a really deep closer at a price, this is the one you want, King Russell. The Arkansas Derby wasn't an impressively fast pace. King Russell still came flying, got Reincarnate and Rocket Can. Now he'll get an extra furlong to run at as well today. And I think that he'll enjoy the added distance. So King Russell at a deep price, a horse that could be usable today. Now let's look at the pace projection for this race. As you can see here, we've got a couple different horses vying for this lead at the start of the race. The 2 verifying. The number 12, Jace's Road, I think will be there as well. Then you've got a couple other horses that could contend depending on the situation. The 7, I've got Reincarnate maybe being the 1, but I could see the 4 or the 6 being in that opening as well. Confidence Game, Kingsbarn, Cyclone Mischief sitting off the side, Dermasotogake, the 17. He's going to be somewhere in that front pack. And then the interesting part now, not as interesting now with the 15 Forte being out, but if you see the 15 there, mid to closing pack, look just right inside. The 14 Angel of Empire and the 5 Tapit Trice, 2 of the favorites in this race, and they should be running about the same trip. Tapit Trice is going to want to get to the outside. He's a bigger horse, and it takes him longer to get moving, but once he does, he's like a train that won't be stopped. So if he can get outside, Tapit Trice will have a full run. Angel of Empire should be able to close from anywhere on the track. Watch those 2 now in tandem, see where they're going to be, how close to each other they'll be. But with this pace, I'm leaning Jace's Road as the pace setter, but I don't think he's really that fast, so I don't expect too fast of a pace. If Verifying feels like he has to go from the inside, maybe that could cook the pace up a little bit, but I'm leaning towards it not being a overly fast pace, just enough. Now let's get to my top selections for this race, and the top selections have had to change a little bit, especially the long shot picks have had to change a little bit because of all the changes. But we're going with top selection, the number 17, Derma Sotogake, the Japanese horse. I'm a really big fan of him. I think he's got a chance to just dominate here today if he can run, if he can get a good trip, if he's feeling up for it, running at 100%. Then second choice is going to be the number 5, Tapit Trice. I think he's just the most consistent horse. I think he's got the most likely chance to finish in the top 3 of any horse in this race. I think as long as he gets in the clear, he will. And I expect him to be able to do enough to get in the clear. He's got a great jockey today in Luis Saez, so no concerns there. My third choice has changed a little bit just because of the dropout of Forte. So we're going to move up a horse that might be a little bit closer to the pace. That's going to be Two Phils. The 3 horse was impressive in the Jeff Ruby and has proven he can win at Churchill. So Two Phils, I'm really going to go with him as my third choice. And then Angel of Empire, fourth choice, the number 14. Hasn't done anything wrong. And really the only other horse I can see winning this race. Okay, maybe one other horse I can see winning, and that's the number 2, my top long shot, Verifying. Maybe not even going to be a long shot anymore, but Verifying is a horse that is going to be up front. And with the way this sets up, Verifying is going to be my top long shot of the day. My other long shots to use, the number 11, Disarm, who's going to be a mid-pack horse. And then the 23, King Russell, coming flying. Those are my top long shots of the race. So that's how you have it. I've got Derma Sotogake as my top pick. Also going to be using Tapit Trice a lot, mixing in Two Phils, Verifying, Disarm, Angel of Empire, King Russell. Those are basically the horses I'm going to be using today. So good luck with your picks. Hope we can get a winner. Happy Kentucky Derby 149. Good luck to all.